So we might, unfortunately, I somehow have got a sore throat. So hopefully I won't lose my voice talking tonight. But if I do lose I won't lose my voice, so we won't worry about that. But we'll start with, say, 10 minutes of meditation. So what you just need to do is, because everybody's an experienced meditator, I think. Let me look through everyone. I think so. I won't give a guided meditation. I'll just introduce the meditation, and we can sit for 10 minutes and we can meditate. You can meditate. Okay. So just find a way to sit comfortably with your back straight and your feet flat on the floor if you're sitting in a chair, or I'm not sure if you're sitting cross-legged on a cushion, but just find a way to sit comfortably with your back straight, your shoulders relaxed. You can have your eyes closed, or you can have them open very gently. And if you've got them open very gently, you just fix your soft gaze about 1 meter in front of you. Find something on the floor to hold your attention and sit with a soft gaze looking at that spot. Relax the shoulders. Keep your nose in line with your abdomen. And take 3 breaths, breathing in, breathing out deeply. And then just come back to your breathing, breathing in and breathing out naturally. No need for a special meditation breath, just the ordinary breath. And keep your attention on your in-breath and your out-breath. On your breath as it enters through the nostrils, and on the breath as it leaves the nostrils. Just paying a very gentle attention to your in-breath and your out-breath. And when you notice that your attention moves away from your breath, which it will, the mind has no pride, so it jumps all over the place. When you notice that your breath has moved away from when your attention has moved away from your breath, just bring your attention back to the breathing in and out very gently. There's no need to judge yourself, whether you're a good meditator or a bad meditator. Simply bring your attention back to the breath as best you can. Breathing in, breathing out, keeping your attention on your in-breath and your out-breath. So you can gently bring your attention back into the room. Notice where you are sitting. Notice the contact between your body and the chair, your feet and the floor, your hands on your lap, the contact between your lips, between your eyes. Become present to where you are sitting. When you are ready, you can open your eyes, and if you need to stretch or to massage your body, please do so. So this evening, I am with you in Sydney. I'm coming to you from the home of my dear friend Bo Tan Phu, and he's joined us for the meditation. So welcome. Welcome to everybody. Okay. Tonight we are going to continue looking at the theme of renunciation, or perhaps better to call it letting go. And the title of the talk tonight is called Beginning Anew, an expression of renunciation. So when I was at, oh, no, let me chant first, sorry. Namo Phap Bonshe Titka Mauni. Namo Shakyamunaya Buddhaya. When I was a child in Sunday school, Christian Sunday school, Mr. Fred Harvey was the superintendent of our Sunday school. And he once pointed something out to us that I have never forgotten over the last 55 years. He said, at the center of sin is I. So he wrote up on the board S-I-N and said at the center of it is I. And I thought, wow, that's true. Many of us will have probably especially Westerners who've grown up in the church, will have rejected thoughts and discussion using the word sin. But Mr. Harvey's point was well taken and well made, and is not all that different from my understanding of Buddhist thinking. At the center of all unwholesome and destructive human behavior is the I, me, mind thought. In my own Truc or bamboo forest tradition, we have a daily practice called in Vietnamese Sam Hoi. In my tradition, it's translated into English as repentance, a word which is sometimes difficult for Westerners to engage with because of our experience of that word in the church. The Plum Village tradition, which was founded by Most Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, calls it Beginning Anew, which is closer to the meaning of the Greek word for repentance, and that is metanoia, meaning to go in a new direction. And I seem to recall recently Bhante Tej Dhammo explained the meaning of metanoia in one of his Dhamma talks. I prefer to use the term beginning anew, which is an expression of renunciation or letting go, much less confusing than the word repentance. And it has that sense of starting over again, of noticing that we have lived unmindfully, and now we start over again and return to the practice of mindfulness in our life. Tonight, I want to share with you two stories, one from the life of Jesus and one from the life of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, or the Buddha-to-be. The interesting thing about these two stories is that they're basically the same story in spite of the philosophical differences between Buddhism and Christianity. The fact that they are basically the same story is very interesting. The stories of great religious heroes in antiquity, the mythological truth contained in our sacred stories, have a lot in common. Have human beings simply been moving towards the solution of fundamental problems all humans encounter in ways particular to our different cultures? And I suspect that's the case. The Christian story found in Matthew 4, verses 1 to 11, was important to me in 1968, when I began my exploration into the spiritual theme of renunciation, of letting go of the I, me, mine thought. And for me, the journey into the monastic life. So let me read to you the text from Matthew 4, 1 to 11. At that time, Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert to be tempted by the devil. He fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards was hungry. The tempter approached and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command that these stones become loaves of bread." He said in reply, "It is written, one does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes forth from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and made him stand on the parapet of the temple and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you, and with their hands they will support you, lest you dash your foot against a stone." Jesus answered him, "Again it is written, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test." Then the devil took him up to a very high mountain, and he showed him all the kingdoms of the world in their magnificence. And he said to him, "All these I shall give to you, if you will prostrate yourself and worship me." At this, Jesus said to him, "Get away, Satan. It is written, the Lord your God shall you worship, and him alone shall you serve." Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and ministered to him. Excuse me. This story of Jesus' temptation follows on from the story of his baptism, in which his identity as the Son of God is established. Jesus is portrayed as vulnerable to the deceits of Satan. Why would Jesus go into the desert for a 40-day retreat after his baptism? It's the same reason that we all need to go on retreat, to refocus on who we are, what we are doing in life, and how we are going, or where we are going in life, and how we're going to get there. Our perspective about life gets blurred by all the noise and the extreme activity of life. Jesus needed time to understand the revelation of his identity given by the voice of his Father at his baptism, where he said, "You are my beloved Son, my favor rests on you." Why do we go off on a meditation retreat? In part, I suggest that it is to reconnect with the person the Buddha Dharma calls us to be. So now we come to the second story, where Mara tempts Siddhartha Gautama at the time that he becomes enlightened. Siddhartha Gautama, after he witnessed the old person, the sick person, the dead person, and the monastic practicing meditation outside the city walls of Savatthi, decided to find the answers to the problems of suffering which he had witnessed and the potential way out demonstrated by the monastic. Eventually, he rejected the extremes of complete self-denial or asceticism and the comforts and indulgences of his former life as a prince. He chose to sit under the Bodhi tree and meditate on suffering and its causes until the answer to these problems became clear to him. He discovered the Four Noble Truths, which included the cause of human suffering, the possibility of transforming suffering, and the pathway to that transformation. During his meditation, the Buddha-to-be was tempted by the demon Mara, who sent his armies and the personifications of thirst, aversion, and discontent, attachment, desire, and greed, to try and persuade him away from his search. The Buddha touched the earth at the moment of his enlightenment, and at the time of Mara's tempting him, calling the earth to bear witness to his achievement of overcoming suffering. An earthquake terrified Mara and his army, who fled. Siddhartha was left in peace to continue his meditation and to quickly realize the path to ending suffering. So these are two stories. It's uncertain that they're absolutely true historically, but they are true mythologically. They tell us a truth about the journey towards awakening. And that is that we are likely to be tempted and that we can prevail against that temptation. So let me share with you a poem I wrote in 2015 that was an expression of my love for and understanding of the story of Siddhartha Gautama's awakening. And the poem is called Trees. Born beneath a pipal tree, the baby brought great promise into the world. Resting under the rose apple tree, the child began to realize that great promise. Exhausted beneath the banyan tree, Sujata makes the decisive gift, rice milk. The journey to the Bodhi tree is possible. Seated beneath the Bodhi tree, the human, luminous, broke loose of all fetters. Lying beneath the sal tree, the old monk entered into final liberation. Trees, with their roots deep in the earth, bear witness. Putting the roots deep into our own hearts, we discover wisdom and love. And that, to me, is the story of not just the Buddha's enlightenment, but his capacity to prevail against the temptations that Mara presents to him. So what is the outcome of both of these men's struggle? Well, both Jesus and the Buddha strove to overcome our human tendency to surrender to the temptation to give up on our integrity, our authenticity, our journey towards attaining goodness, righteousness, or wholesomeness, which is our human vocation. In the end, in their own terms, they succeeded in overcoming the temptations they encountered, and they went on to share their insights with countless others. Christians celebrate this highly significant part of Jesus' story in what is called the season of Lent, the 40-day period leading up to Easter. We also celebrate and reflect on the journey of Siddhartha to his enlightenment, both at Vesak on the full moon day in May and in the week leading up to Bodhi Day on the 8th of December. And this particular festival on Bodhi Day is a time when practitioners of the Buddha Dharma in the East Asian Buddhist traditions celebrate the Buddha's enlightenment separately, specifically, and our own potential for realizing the fullness of our Buddha nature, the attainment of our human vocation. So what follows are some reflections on these two stories. Jesus and the Buddha were tempted just as we are tempted. being tempted is not a bad thing in itself. It is a part of our life experience, to be drawn to go in directions that are unwholesome, contrary to our capacity for that which is wholesome and virtuous. We all have this experience of temptation. In itself, it's not bad. What is significant is what we learn from our experience and how we respond to the pull towards, in the case of Buddhist teaching, the tendency to live out of the I, me, mine thought. Secondly, the temptations of the Buddha toward foregoing his journey to awakening and to remain ensnared or captured by greed, hatred, and ignorance may seem different from the ways we are tempted, but they are not. The temptations of Mara pulled Siddhartha Gautama and pull us to deny our true identity as Buddhas in the making. These temptations are invitations to deny the kind of person we want to be and instead turn to unhealthy ways to satisfy the I, me, mine aspiration. Thirdly, by resisting the temptations, Jesus chose to depend on his Father to satisfy his deepest hunger, which was to relate with others in an ordinary way and not rely on reputation, power, and possessions. By resisting the temptations, the Buddha chose to depend on his own understanding, his own determination, and his true nature to overcome greed, hatred, and ignorance. The questions for each of us are, how do we satisfy our deepest hungers? Do we depend on prestige and power, attachment and aversion, the pull to aggrandize and defend ourselves? And what are the antidotes for these unhelpful tendencies? Fourthly, are we afraid to face up to the myriad pulls to involve ourselves in unwholesome action? When we are confronted with temptation, are we afraid to stand up to it? Is there a place in our practice to begin anew, as the Plum Village tradition calls it, to acknowledge our unwholesome thoughts, words, and actions? Might we regularly commit ourselves or recommit ourselves to our practice? And that's what we're doing when we practice Beginning Anew. We acknowledge that we have perhaps succumbed to some sort of temptation, and we recommit ourselves to our practice of mindfulness. Fifthly, what is all this to do with renunciation or letting go? What has it to do with my own 16-year-old call to renunciation? The verse from the reading in Matthew's Gospel that has remained with me all of these years is, "One does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." Jesus is not suggesting that we don't live on bread at all, just as Siddhartha Gautama realized that he needed nourishment and accepted the rice milk from Sujata. Of course, we need food and drink, without which we will not have the energy to practice. We will become focused on the need for food if we deny ourselves food. And I remember going off on a retreat in 2007 to Kangaroo Island and thinking, well, I'll just eat brown rice. And then I got really sick of brown rice after the second day. And then I thought, well, I won't eat anything. And then all of a sudden, all I could think about was fish and seafood and things like that. And it just overwhelmed me. And I realized that I really wasn't up to fasting, that I didn't actually need to fast. I could eat what was necessary and keep practicing. So, of course, we need food and drink, without which we won't have the energy to practice. We'll, as I said, become focused on the need for food if we deny it to ourselves. Both Jesus and Siddhartha Gautama realize the need for a balance. We need food, all the supports of a physical human life, but we also need access to and the practice of the noble truth, the Arya Satya, the profoundest truth of reality. And this includes what we call in Buddhism the two truths, both the ultimate truth and the historical truth. The ultimate truth discovered by the Buddha of the non-self nature of living and being, and the interdependent nature of reality, as well as the historical or bred nature of reality. Both are required. We can't have one without the other. And the Buddha is not criticizing bread or food or the historical realm. He's saying that both are necessary. Now, in my own spirituality, there's always been a tendency towards the denial of the significance of the bred nature of reality. Over the years, however, I have renounced my own version of asceticism. I have acknowledged the significance of healthy and enjoyable food, the experience of human and more than human companionship. And when I say more than human companionship, I mean my dogs. The shelter and the security of simple housing is necessary to a life well lived. And then there is the joy of learning and the importance of maintaining our health. Indeed, I now assert that if I'm going to join a religion, I need to like the food. And I happen to love Vietnamese food, so I'm in the right place. I have, in fact, always loved food from all over the world. And one of the nicest things my mother used to say to me was, I've never had any trouble feeding you. So yes, of course, our practice involves transforming our suffering, letting go of the I, me, mind thought. But I have come to believe that our practice also includes gratitude for all of the blessings life offers and to enjoy our lives. The spiritual path of letting go also includes, based in the precepts and the four divine abidings, an ethic of self-giving and costly love. This altruism is costly in both Christianity and Buddhism. Jesus tells his disciples that people can show no greater love than that they lay down their lives for their friends. Jesus doesn't mean that this costly love is shown just for those whom we like. He is asking us the question, who are really your friends? Just as in the story of the Good Samaritan, he asks, who really is your neighbor? Jesus teaches and eventually demonstrates in his own life that his self-giving love that we need to cultivate is both universal and unconditional. And this is the same, what I would call bodhisattva love, that Shantideva speaks of in his work, the Bodhicharyavatara, where he says the following, and this is probably the third time I've read this to you. May I be the medicine and the physician for the sick. May I be their nurse until their illness never recurs. With showers of food and drink, may I overcome the afflictions of hunger and thirst. May I become food and drink during times of famine. May I be an inexhaustible treasury for the destitute. With various forms of assistance, may I remain in their presence. For the sake of accomplishing the welfare of all sentient beings, I freely give up my body, enjoyments, and all my virtues of the three times. Surrendering everything is nirvana, and my mind seeks nirvana. If I must surrender everything, it is better that I give it to sentient beings. May I be a protector for those who are without protectors, a guide for travelers, and a boat, a bridge, and a ship for those who wish to cross over. May I be a lamp for those who seek light, a bed for those who seek rest, and may I be a servant for all beings who desire a servant. To all sentient beings, may I be a wish-fulfilling gem, a vase of good fortune, an efficacious mantra, a great medication, a wish-fulfilling tree, and a wish-granting cow. Just as earth and other elements are useful in various ways to innumerable sentient beings dwelling throughout infinite space, so may I be in various ways a source of life for the sentient beings present throughout space until they are all liberated. And now, as long as space endures, as long as there are beings to be found, may I continue likewise to remain, to drive away the sorrows of the world. And I just want to add a little thing, that when I first came to the Buddha Dhamma in 1978, I think it was, I started attending a group based in the Tibetan tradition. And they started to talk about the Bodhisattva ideal. And then they read this section from Shantideva. And in it, I recognized Jesus. I thought, gosh, he was a Bodhisattva. So for me, from that moment, the Bodhisattva ideal became important. That doesn't mean I couldn't learn things from other traditions. I did, as you know. I learned a great deal from Ayakema and Prakantipalo. But for me, the whole question of self-giving love has always been a big part of my Buddhist practice and my understanding of the Dharma. For the renunciate, for the one who's letting go, there is the clear message that bread is there to nurture us so that we can live a life of self-giving love, which necessarily includes both wisdom and ethics. Buddhists bless food with this very thought that the food we receive, the food we consume, is medicine to sustain us in our spiritual practice. We are neither gluttonous nor are we abstemious. Each of these results from an gluttony and being abstemious, or being abstemious, results from an attachment to our own points of view, to I, me, and mine. We must take a middle path, as Siddhartha Gautama did when he took the milk rice from Sujata, and when Jesus allowed the angels to minister to him for the sake of the path. Ultimately, the renunciate relinquishes the I, me, mine thought, both greed and aversion, and living in a balanced way, practices self-giving love or altruism. The renunciate renounces a false piety for the sake of realism and compassion, the path to healing and wholeness. So in summary, we are going to be tempted all through our lives to act on the I, me, mine thought. Secondly, we can learn from these temptations and the challenges that follow on. These temptations, and even succumbing to them, do not make us bad. They happen because we're human and we can learn from them, always moving at our own pace in the direction of fulfilling our human vocation. Succumbing to temptation simply requires of us to begin anew, to return to our practice of wisdom, mindful meditation, and virtue. And when we do fall prey to temptations to satisfy the I, me, mine thought, it doesn't help us to judge ourselves. All we need to do is to acknowledge, gosh, I blew it, and come back to our practice. The ultimate truth and the historical truth are not separate. The truth of no self and all of those things is not separate from the truth, from the bread truth, the truth of ordinary life. They are flip sides of the same coin, and that coin is our lives. We need neither abandon bread, nor do we need to abandon the whole word of truth. We need just to let go gently and over time, the demands of judgmental ascetic thoughts and replace them with thoughts of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and open-heartedness, not only to others, but to ourselves as well. And that's all I have to say. And I'm a little concerned that what I've said might not make any sense to anybody. So let's have some questions or discussion and see if I can make sense of it for you this evening.
Thanks very much, Thay. I don't have a question yet, but I'm just letting anyone know. Just unmute yourself, or if you'd like to type a question in the chat, you can do that as well, and I can read it out if you're unable to speak.
And if I may recall an incident from my life, how life teaches us. 1961, I got married. Girl next door, she was 18, I was 19. And then it was a communist country, Russia occupied. And I was taken, drawn in for 2 years in the army. So I had to leave my beautiful young wife. And for 9 months, I couldn't see her. It wasn't easy. Anyway, because I was the only man, only boy married in the whole group, she sent me a parcel. Nice Hungarian sausages, some Christmas cakes, etc., etc. And of course, we were always hungry. Spending 2 weeks in the mountain in early February, it was frightening because you couldn't sleep from the cold. It was minus 15, minus 20 degrees. So anyway, that food was a real treasure in the cold. But I had another 20 guys with me. And I thought if I shared my food, I hardly have anything left. And I ate it in secret. Then, all my life after that, and this was 60 years ago, I felt ashamed. And then I told myself, whatever food I will receive from now on, I'm going to offer it and share it. I wasn't a Buddhist then. In a communist country, no such thing as the Dhamma. So, few years later, I managed to come to Australia. My whole family was here already. And we had a small cake shop in Rosebery, very close to the city. And Tampra Samai, Prakantipalo, rented next door. So, and then my sister bought a unit, a villa home next to Mrs. Jackson, Malcolm Pierce, the Buddhist Society of New South Wales. I hardly spoke English, read more than spoke. So karma came after me. I couldn't avoid the yellow robe. Prakantipalo on the footpath, and I called him in, made a coffee, nice cakes, and this was in 1966. Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So that shame, then I learned that feeling shame is a real treasure. When you do something wrong, never lie to yourself, admit it. And that treasure will help you throughout your life. So I've been married 60 years. So my wife, Martha, she makes the food. Then the first thing I do, I thank her effort. And when I finish the dinner, thank you, Martha, thank you very much. And then I do the dishes. So that shameful occasion when I was young, that I was stingy and not sharing what I had all my life, it came with me. But of course, the Dhamma is the most beautiful thing in the world. And always so grateful and happy to still learn it, and just finding that little peace in my heart, which is a real treasure. So actually, Thay, I just finished reading Dhamma Pioneers. Do you know that book?
I brought it to give to someone. Oh, I brought it to give to Gus Real, but he already had it, so I gave it to somebody else on Sunday.
Well, that is the book I'm reading now.
All right.
Gus gave me that book because in 1970s, I shared many retirement, a 10-day with Oyakema, and Gus used to sit in front of me in the old sala.
Mm.
And he's a few years younger than I am. And another thing, Gus sat motionless, 1 hour, absolutely didn't move. And then envy in my heart. I said, how come this guy in front of me never moves? And I keep fidgeting and my back is hurting. Of course, because I was a pastry cook, and I spent 10, 12 hours running around in the bakeries. So sitting down, cross-legged, it was real torture. So life is really funny. And I got that book from Gus, and I'm just finishing it. And it's one of the saddest books I ever read. It really broke my heart, because I was there when the old sala was built and the new sala was built, and we all disappeared. I always knew there'll be a problem because the monastery is far away. The road was really bad. I used to go with motorbikes across the Hawkesbury River and then riding through frost and fire, as Prakantipalo said. I knew that on the end we'll lose it. But reading the book is incredible. Going back 30 years, and what happened with the Prakantipalo, I was there that day when we had the first Tibetan teaching. And they opened a bottle of red wine, and Prakantipalo lifted his glass and put it out in the middle, fill it up. I was shocked. But of course, I never judge. I know he had a hard life also, and but after that, everything started falling apart. So Gus is really a good man giving me that book, and I have to give it back to him. Yeah. So life is. Yes.
Let me ask you a question, Frank. When you when you think back to that time in Hungary when you kept the food to yourself, and when you what can I say, when you began anew and started to share and all of that, when you acknowledged that you had behaved in an unwholesome way and you started to share it, what did you have to let go of in order to get to that point, to move from the point of hanging on and keeping it all to yourself and realizing that you needed to share?
Yes.
What did you let go of?
In the beginning, I thought that it was greed I had to give up. But I grown up in poverty. I was listening to the American planes bombing our city, very close to the Austrian border. But when in the 1960s, I got into contact with Prakantipalo and Tamprakru Samai and Malcolm Pierce, etc., then I realized that it's not greed, it's the I have to get rid of. And that was a big, big change in my life, because easy to give up greed when you're a rich man and you can give things away. But try to give this non-existent ego, myself, away. That is a big life-changing thing. So started with greed, but then the ego, that there is no controller behind the greed. That was the biggest thing I learned. And I'm very grateful to all my teachers.
Can I tell you something nice?
Yes.
Speaking of food, yesterday, Gus and I went to an Italian restaurant, and I had calzone and he had pasta, and we both had tiramisu for dessert. So there's a lovely connection between my dear friend Gus and your dear friend Gus and food. There you are.
Yes.
And neither of us repented of eating lovely Italian food. We just enjoyed ourselves.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
So does anybody else have anything they'd like to contribute to the discussion?
Frank, I think, is it just greed, like, when you hang on, as you say, to the food, or could it be fear of, at that time, it's like if you give up your food, you may, you may be starving. Could it be, may not be just greed, maybe the fear?
You're right, Meredith, 100%, because the Russian army was next to us and they got good food. And the Hungarians, well, we are a small nation, they didn't worry about us at all. And we were hungry. And when it's very cold and you cannot sleep and you're hungry, therefore, somehow you become selfish. But another thing, I grown up in poverty. During the war, we had a bakery, but had no flour to produce bread. And you had to queue up for half a kilo of sugar or any kind of food at all. Therefore, it was precious. So I was scared, of course. I'm going to be hungry. And my little wife sending this lovely package. So we are human, but we learn. And like in the Bible study today, I was shocked that the pastor said that you cannot do anything, man. Only God can help you do things. It's completely wrong. And then I couldn't resist and said that they all know that I'm a Buddhist, that only guilty ones are born. Nobody said a word. Monkey, that lovely Japanese show, it started always, good goes to heaven, the bad goes to hell, but perfect ones are not born. We are here on this crazy place, Earth, to learn, to learn about ourselves. Who are we? What are we? And no, only God, only God. And where is God? I couldn't resist. The Buddha said, there's no Buddha outside the heart, and there is no heart outside the Buddha. Jesus said the same thing. But God is in the Bible. It's in the letters. It makes me so sad that God takes away all our will. We are becoming, at the first moment, that's the John Calvin, who learned the teaching from Luther Martin. Yeah, I cannot agree with that. But
so does anybody else have something to say or contribute tonight. You're sitting there looking really serene, Sarah. Very serene.
Mhm.
Do you have something to say?
I was thinking, yeah, I was just thinking in my meditation practice and my daily life, I've got this tendency to go into working really hard and keeping busy, and not, yeah, and today in my practice, I realized it was really linked to low self-worth and wanting to have, reputation and all of that stuff, and it was like that was the kind of seemingly positive thing of working hard actually is actually a form of temptation and a way of moving away from from practice, from the way I'd like to be. I just thought I'd love your comment on that, I suppose.
I muted myself because I needed to get a strepsil out of the packet, and I didn't want to snap, crackle, and pop in front of everybody. What I was thinking, Sarah, and now I think I've forgotten it. If what you've experienced, this notion around all the notions around self-worth and that are there, and you've acknowledged them, what would beginning anew look like for you?
Oh, that's a hard one. Probably when the tendency that I notice in the daytime, the tendency to go to that place of busyness rather than staying with being present with whatever it is, trying to be acknowledging that that's what I'm doing and be present, try to be present with the feeling that's coming up, that's moving me into that place of busyness and achievement and which if I do that, it leaves me so empty for other people and particularly for my son and for less time for my dad and things like that. It's interesting, and it's all driven by this need to build my self-esteem, and I suppose connecting with an idea of love for myself, yeah, and compassion. Maybe that's what it is.
In the beginning of that book that I keep recommending, which is The Heartwood of the Bodhi Tree, Jack Cornfield gives an introduction to Ajahn Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, and he asks Buddhadasa Bhikkhu a question about Westerners particularly. He says that lots of Westerners come to spiritual practice really hurt, that we've grown up with lots of judgment and self-hatred, really. And so Jack Cornfield says to Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, what should Westerners do to try and overcome or heal this self-deprecating or self-judging voice that we so often, that comes up for us? And Buddhadasa Bhikkhu says, well, first of all, you should spend lots of time in nature. Just hang out in nature and just feel yourself a part of the world, that you're not separate from the world, you're not other than the world, that you are part of the world, part of nature. And secondly, your practice should be full of loving kindness, particularly directed at yourself. So it's like metta meditation, focusing on yourself. And some people might think that that's really selfish, but in fact, it's really healing. It's unlikely that we're going to be able to be there for others if we're not there for ourselves. And that loving kindness practice directed at ourselves, according to a great and famous Thai master, and who's going to argue with that, is a really important thing to engage with. It's really easy. You know, I think the danger about this whole question of beginning anew is the danger is that we look at the things that we're not happy about and we judge ourselves. But that's not the point. The point is just to acknowledge and then get back to what we're on about. And we may need to do a lot of loving kindness meditation to overcome that pull towards self-hatred or self-deprecation. I don't know if that makes any sense to you at all.
Yeah, it sounds very helpful and probably something I need to do more of. Yeah.
And of course, that's one of the lovely things, I presume, I've never been there, but I presume that's one of the lovely things about Vajrasala, that there's a lot of beautiful nature just to immerse yourself in.
There's beautiful nature, and also the place when I went there last is so imbued with the love of people for each other and for the Dhamma and for the association and for caring. I just feel it in this place. That's so healing too.
Yes.
In the building itself, it seems.
And I have to say that last Sunday with AB at the Buddhist Library was one of the loveliest experiences I've had with Sangha for a long time. Just our openness and our willingness to trust one another with our stories, our friendliness. You know, I don't think we were particularly formal. We were really at ease with one another. It was really beautiful. And if that's what your Sangha can do for you, then it's really worth supporting your Sangha and participating in it as best you can, of course. So that's just to let you all know how much I really loved Sunday.
Yeah, I have to tell you, Sarah, it's your existence, your coming to Vajrasala is actually bring so much meaning to that place itself. You know, we can have that place and, you know, and Vajrasala was supposed to mean for place of healing, but for you coming, making the effort, some of you know that, you know, Sarah got to make extra effort to come to this retreat center. And I remember, I think in 2017, you even have to take the train, you know, to transfer from one place to another and reach Wingelow station and then hire a taxi to bring you. I mean, it's tremendous effort coming to, you know, attend the retreat. And it just really inspired us, you know, to have this place that will be able to, you know, to help you, and you help us as well, you know, to bring up this healing place, bring the life to this healing place. So your strength, your dedications, your commitments really inspire many of us today. And thank you so much for that.
Thank you. No to thank me. That's lovely. Yeah. And maybe we have more, hopefully we'll have more people in my situation there too.
Yeah, we hope so. Yeah.
Especially so it's so beautifully set up now.
Yes.
It takes me just one little question, Thay, if you have the time to answer. Devotion. We never speak about devotion. 50 years I'm listening to Dhamma, many teachers. Nobody ever mentioned devotion. And that is hurting me because when I do something wrong, I start chanting, "Oh Lord, be thou my guide," etc. I take refuge to the Buddha. Like I see a pretty woman, and then, oh, I feel ashamed. And then devotion comes up in my heart and gives me so much joy and happiness. Vakka, this monk, when he got up, the first thing he done was sat down eyeing the Buddha nonstop all day. So on the end, the Buddha said to him, "Listen, Vakka, don't look at this decaying body. There are some trees, sit there and meditate." But he never said, "Do not have devotion." It's we are all different, I know. But devotion gave me so much joy and happiness, like a Catholic, believing God and Jesus Christ. So what do you think about devotion, Thay?
Okay. Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that you mentioned that you're looking forward to being with your people on Sunday,
Yeah.
but I'd just like to remind you that you're actually with your people right now.
I know that.
I know we're not, let me finish. I know we're not together in the flesh, but we are together right now. And Zoom is probably the best we can do for a lot of reasons. And I never actually feel, I never actually feel that I'm, what's the word? I always feel the closeness and the warmth of people on Zoom. Maybe that's because I want to, but nevertheless I do. And that's true with AEB, and it's true with the two small sanghas that I belong to in Adelaide. And it's also true of the Buddhist poetry group that I belong to. And there are only 3 of us in that on Zoom. And we had dinner together on Monday night. So when you meet together on Zoom, we are still together. And then when we meet in the flesh, like we did on Sunday, or like I did on Monday night with the people from the poetry group, it makes it that much more wonderful. You know, suddenly I see what Meredith really looks like.
She's a pretty girl.
Or yes, or I see what Sujata actually looks like, or any one of a number of people. But I wouldn't have that thrill if I hadn't known you first on Zoom. So even though, you know, you are with your people right now, Frank, that's my point. As to devotion, well, I'm the devotional type too. And when I first became a Buddhist, it was in Canberra with Ayakema and Prakansipalo. And my conversion to Buddhism was very intellectual. It was about ideas and understanding and that sort of thing. My conversion to Buddhism at the level of devotion didn't happen for many years until one evening at the Adelaide Festival of Arts. They had a whole installation using flames and fire. And I took my mum, who had dementia at the time, and we sat outside on the banks of the River Torrens, and I brought a lovely picnic, and we had a picnic. And suddenly there were all these installations from different community groups processing down to the river with flames. And I turned around at one point, and there was the nun from Buddha House, which is a Tibetan tradition. And they were carrying on a platform this beautiful bronze image of the Buddha surrounded by lights. And the nun was carrying a big bundle of incense at the beginning. And my heart just swelled up in my chest. And I realized that at that moment, I was converted to Buddhism at the level of devotion. Now, I was very fortunate, but I'm also very fortunate, and I think we are all fortunate, but I belong to a Vietnamese tradition where there is a lot of devotion. And I remember being in the monastery in America on a Sunday when they would give a Dharma talk and there'd be chanting and all of that. And there were two very old Vietnamese ladies who came every week, and they were good friends. And one of them was the mother to the husband in a marriage, and the other was the mother to the wife in the marriage. So I made the point that the husband and the wife were very lucky to have the mothers-in-law being good friends. It bode well for the marriage. But at the end of the day, I would stand in the dining room, and one of the old ladies would stand in front of the Buddha image, and very mindfully, she would bow to the Buddha. And it was so beautiful to watch the devotion and the mindfulness in this woman bowing, that I used to stand behind the door and watch so that she wouldn't be disturbed, and I could watch her bow to the Buddha. It was so beautiful. So, Frank, what I suggest is that just to start the process of devotion, you just stand in front of the Buddha image, wherever it is, and you breathe in, and you breathe out, and very mindfully, you bow. And 3 times you can bow. And that's the beginning of your devotion. You can't necessarily depend on everybody else to agree with you and want to be devoted in the way that you are, but you can practice it yourself. And of course, there's a lot of chanting, in AEB, you have a lot of beautiful Pali chants, the Vandana and the Tiratana and all of that. You can get it. There must be tapes where you can actually chant along with it. And there are many suttas that you can chant and read. And there's some beautiful poetry also that's not scriptural, but there's the beautiful hymn by Matricheta, which talks that it's a hymn of praise to the Buddha. And it's a beautiful poem that you can say, and you can find a chant tone for it. So there's a lot of material around, but you may have to start doing it yourself. And that's good practice. That's, you are, even if you just bow very mindfully to the Buddha 3 times, you are taking responsibility for your own path. And in the end, nobody else can take responsibility for your journey but you. So there's a beginning to bow beautifully to the Buddha and know that, and just to try and keep your mind fully in the presence of the Buddha image as a reminder of the Buddha in yourself, as a reminder of the Buddha who loved humanity so much that he spent all that time to become enlightened and then 50 years to teach it to people. And some of those people weren't really very helpful. The story of how the monks were so arguing so much that the Buddha went off and stayed in the forest with the tigers because it was safer to be with the tigers. Such sacrifice for us is really not all that different from the sacrifice of Jesus, really, or of many bodhisattvas, So,
thank you, Thay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thay, for your talk tonight. And thank you so much for going through it with your sore throat. You did so well. And it's 9 o'clock now.
Okay.
So thank you so much. It was very helpful. I found it very helpful. Really appreciate
Thank you, Thay.
wisdom and thoughts.
Shall we dedicate the merit?
Yeah.
May the wholesome energy that we have generated here tonight and at any other time be for the benefit of all living beings. May all beings be well and happy. May all beings be free from suffering. May all beings know peace and joy and the causes of peace and joy. And may we all continue to walk the Buddha's path of truth and love together. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.